Hi guys, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to The Wandering Reader. Today I'm going to do my February wrap up. In February I read a total of 9 books and 3,140 pages. So it's another really good reading month for me. I'm just going to talk you through some of my statistics to begin with. So all of the books that I read in February were backlist books, no 2018 releases. I read 2 historical fiction, 1 literary fiction, 1 romance, 1 YA, 1 fantasy and 3 thrillers. So I'm really pleased with the wide variety of genres that I read in February. My theme for the month was book to movie adaptations and I read 4 of those, all 4 that were on my TBR, so I was really pleased with how I got on with that. And in terms of my star ratings, I read 1 5-star, I had 5 4-stars, 3 3-star reads and then 2 DNFs. The 2 DNFs are not part of the 9 that I completed during the month. So yeah, I can't really say that I read 11 books because I didn't read the whole of the ones that I DNF'd. So yeah, but I did think I thought I'd mention as part of my statistics that I read that I DNF'd 2 books. So those were all of my statistics for the month of February. I thought I'd jump now into the books that I read during the month, but before I talk about the individual books that I've read, I thought I would mention the 2 books that I DNF'd. The first of those was The Honeymoon, and this is by Tina Seskis, and I was doing a buddy read of this with Lisa from Books and Smiles, and we picked this up right at the beginning of February, and I was sort of sitting in the reading room one evening. I think it was a Friday night, and I read like the first 50 to 70 pages of it, something like that, and straight away I just knew that this wasn't going to be the book for me. I was quite excited because it's a thriller set on some sort of tropical island during a couple's honeymoon, and at the beginning of the book the husband has gone missing and the wife doesn't know where he is basically. But I just couldn't get on with this because of the writing, and there were so many it was just awful. It really was. There were so many sentences. I actually started underlining different things to do with the way that things had been written down. I don't really underline my books a lot, but I was so angry with how things had been written. So I'll see whether I can find an example of that now. Okay, so this is one example that I underlined. This is speech. He wants to take me up on my offer to meet me again. Her fingers made speech marks, but there are already speech marks around the word my. So why do you need to put that again? I just don't understand that. Then we've got this one. Gemma headed back across the steel grey rug towards the kitchen. Why do we need a description of what colour the rug is? I don't really understand that. Not only is it grey, but it's still grey as well. We don't really need that. And then there were some similes in here that I just found ridiculous. The living room was upstairs and it looked out onto a garden that fell away from the house like a crater. What? Just dreadful. And Lisa and I were talking about it that evening, or I think the next morning, and she had read the first little bit of this as well, just wasn't getting on with it. And I really hate I've got the word dissing in my head, but this is just really not a good way of putting it. But I really hate kind of hating on an author's books, because I do understand how much effort has gone into writing something like this and how lucky you are to be published and things like that, but I just couldn't get on with the writing, and I had no attachment whatsoever to the character, and I just didn't really care what was going on with the plot at all. So Lisa and I both decided to DNF it, and I'm so glad that I did. So this is going to a charity shop. The other book that I DNF'd, I'd been reading since January, and that is Dennis and Greer, a love story, edited by Molly Gold, and this is a non-fiction book that was sent to me by the author last year, and it's told in the series of letters. So she found a load of letters in her grandma's loft after she died, I think, and then she decided to publish the letters in this book. And I don't know, I read I think 150 pages of this, and it was just all pretty samey. and he was about to go off to the Vietnam War, and I could just see it being Say Me Again, and I could see exactly what direction it was going in, and I didn't particularly care. So I was like, I don't want to waste my time on books that I'm not really that invested in, so I DNF'd that one as well. Moving on to the books I actually completed in February, the first of those was The Light Between Oceans by M.L. Stedman. After Lisa and I DNF'd The Honeymoon, we decided that we would buddy read this together, and this was on my February TBR because it has been adapted into a movie, and we read this together and absolutely loved it. I'm still yet to watch the movie, I know, I must get around to doing that, but I gave this 5 stars, absolutely loved it. I've done a full review of this on my channel, so I'm not going to speak too much more about it here. You can go and check out more of my thoughts in that review video. The next book that I completed in February was The Tidal Zone, and this is by Sarah Moss. This is one that I've been reading in January and hadn't managed to complete by the end of the month. This is a literary fiction book, and it focuses around a family where the eldest daughter collapses at school and stops breathing. And then she spends some time in a hospital, and they're trying to kind of work out what made her stop breathing. But this is not a book about the plot, it's more about the characters and the themes that the writer wants to explore. So it talks a lot about family life, modern family life. The husband in this is the one that stays at home rather than the wife, so that you've got that kind of dynamic going on, and that discussion about kind of the way dads that do that nowadays, I suppose. It's also about illness and grief and love and lots of other things, and I thought this was alright. I appreciated the writing in this, I appreciated what she was doing and what she was trying to talk about, but I just wasn't that enamoured by it. I didn't really enjoy the writing style that much. I was sort of forcing myself to read it and sort of not, sort of appreciating what she was doing and sort of not. So yeah, I don't know whether Sarah Moss's writing is for me. I probably won't pick up anything else by her. I gave it 3 stars. I did think it was good, and like I said, I appreciated some of the things that she was doing in here, just not a book for me. Next up, I read a book on my Kindle, and that was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is a romance novel that focuses around 2 people that work together, and it is a hate to love romance. And it had been ages since I'd read something on my Kindle, and ages since I'd read a romance novel, and it was just what I needed at that particular time. So it wasn't around Valentine's Day, it was a couple of I think it was about a week before Valentine's Day, so I can't even say it was a Valentine's Day read, but it was just what I needed, like I said, at that particular time, and I really enjoyed it. There were lots of laugh out loud moments, and there were lots of kind of warm fuzzy moments, and there were lots of great moments to do with their relationship, and I really enjoyed it. Chelsea from Chelsea Dolling Reads talks about this one all the time on her channel and recommends it all the time, so I was really intrigued to pick it up for that reason, and I'm so glad I did. Really enjoyed it, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. Next up, I read The Virgin Suicides, and this is by Jeffrey Eugenides. This was another one that was on my book to movie adaptations at TBR, and when I looked this up earlier, people are classing this as YA, which I find a little bit strange, maybe because it's told from the perspective of teenagers, so therefore they're classing it as YA for that reason. But it's got some really quite dark themes in it, so I don't really know if I would class it as YA, but there we go. So this basically tells the story of the Lisbon sisters. They are 5 sisters, and it's set during the 1970s in America over one kind of really hot summer. And these, at the beginning of the book, one of the sisters kills herself, and it's being told from the perspective of boys in the local neighbourhood who are kind of obsessed with these girls, but they're telling the story now that they're older, so they're kind of looking back on events. So you quite appreciate the way that it was being told. I thought that was quite clever. This, like I said earlier, was really dark, quite depressing, and I don't really know that I got a lot out of it, to be honest. I've heard people refer to this as their favourite book, and I just don't get that at all. I watched the film afterwards, and I quite enjoyed the film. It had some big names in it, including Kirsten Dunst, and it was directed, I think, by Sofia Coppola, and I quite liked the way that they put the film together. It mirrored the book pretty well, but I was kind of meh about the book and about the film, really. I could kind of see what she was doing with the whole idea of teenage mental health and being a teenager and sort of that sort of idea, but I just wasn't that enamoured by it, so I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Next up, I read Assassin's Apprentice, and this is by Robin Hobb. This is another one that I started in January and hadn't got around to finishing, so I finally finished this one off in February. This tells the story of Fitz, and at the beginning of the book he is dropped off at the castle by his mother, who kind of sort of just leaves him there because he is the son of one of the princes in the castle. So they refer to him throughout the whole book as the royal bastard. And he is brought up in this castle. He works as a stable hand, and then later on in the book he starts to be trained as an assassin. People have such a love of Robin Hobb, and my husband absolutely loves him. If you've seen him on my channel, then you'll definitely know that. So he was the one that encouraged me to pick this up in January as a sort of new to me author recommendation. And I'm really glad that I picked it up. I did really enjoy the story. I really enjoyed the character development and the world that Robin Hobb was building up. And by the end of the book I definitely wanted to continue, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Sort of umming and ahhing as I was reading it. Do I really want to be invested in this series? It's such a long series and I don't know how I'm feeling about it halfway through. But then the second half of the book really convinced me that I need to pick up the remainder in this trilogy and definitely give those a go, and then also dip into more of the world of the Realm of the Elderlings, I think it's called. So yeah, really did enjoy this. Ended up giving it 4 stars. I think because fantasy isn't necessarily my favourite genre, so I don't know, yeah, I think something would really have to blow me away for me to give it 5 stars, but yeah, really enjoyed it nonetheless, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up I read Brooklyn, and this is by Colm Tobin, and this is another book that I was reading for my book to movie adaptations in February, and this tells the story of Eilish, and I was pronouncing it wrong until I watched the film, and when I was reading it, because it's spelled E-I-L-I-S, I was pronouncing it in my head as Ellis, but when I watched the film they were pronouncing it as Eilish, which is obviously the Irish pronunciation of it, so I'm glad I watched the film for that reason. So this tells the story of Eilish, and at the beginning of the book, she's living in Ireland, in the southeast of Ireland, and it's the early 1950s, and she's finding it quite difficult to get a job. She's manages to get a job for 1 day a week at a grocery store, but there isn't a lot of work around, and she, you know, is finding it difficult to get herself a career, basically. So her sister talks to the local priest, or no, sorry, the priest who lives, a priest who's come over but lives in Brooklyn, he basically sponsors her to go and live in America. So she goes out to America to start a new life, basically, and the story is about how she settles in America and the sort of life that she has over there. I really enjoyed this. I thought the writing was brilliant. I really enjoyed watching Eilish's story unfold and her character development, and looking at the way that Brooklyn was described at this particular time, and delving into some of the issues to do with immigration in the 1950s. And it was really emotional at moments, just that kind of idea of leaving your whole family behind, venturing out by yourself to a new country must be the scariest thing in the world, especially as a young woman at this particular time. Yeah, I don't know, I just really felt for her. So I really enjoyed the story. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I think because some of the things that happened at the end kind of bothered me a little bit, and if you've read this you'll probably know what I'm talking about. and I kind of understood why they were there, but at the same time I was kind of, I didn't really agree with some of the decisions that she was making towards the end. But I did really enjoy this. I've watched the film of this and it was absolutely fantastic. I would definitely recommend the film. Again, it's got some big names in it, none of which I can remember off the top of my head, but the main character, Ailish, is played by the same actress who's playing the main part in the new film Lady Bird that's out at the moment. I cannot think of her name off the top of my head. But yeah, and then some other big names in it as well, and I really like the way that the film was put together. I was completely caught up in it when I watched it a couple of weeks ago, and I would definitely recommend that, and as well as reading the book too. Then towards the end of the month it was Thrillerathon. So the first book that I completed for Thrillerathon was Shutter Island, and this is by Dennis Lehane. And this basically tells the story of a man called Teddy Daniels, and he is a US Marshal, and he's been asked to go across to Shutter Island, which is the home of a mental institution or psychiatry institution. It's the Ashcliffe Hospital for the criminally insane, because one of their convicts has escaped basically, and he's been asked to go and investigate and go and look for this convict. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot, because you definitely need to go into this as blind as possible. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. I've heard a couple of people talk about it, April from Getting Hygge With It and Krista from Books and Jams, and both of them said that they didn't enjoy it as much because they'd watched the film before, so they knew what the big reveal was, but I hadn't. I didn't have any idea what this was going to be about, and I really ended up enjoying it. I read this I think in a day or a day and a half. I think I picked it up on the Friday evening, and then I spent the whole of Saturday reading it. And I think I finished it on the Saturday evenings. This is such a quick and easy read. Yeah, would definitely recommend this. And this one I ended up giving 4.5 stars. Really recommend it if you like thrillers and you haven't read this. It's a big backlist book, isn't it? It came out in the 90s, I think. Oh no, that's not true. First published in 2003. So it's been quite a while since it's been published, 15 years. But I would say if you haven't read this and you like thrillers, then I would definitely recommend picking it up. Then I read Final Girls, and this is by Riley Sager, and it's ticked off a couple of the challenges, one about the cover and one about your most anticipated thriller. And this tells the story of, I can't remember her name, Quincy, and she's what's classed as a final girl, and that's a label that the press has put on her. And she was the only girl to survive in this big knife attack in the cabin in the woods that they were staying in, and she yeah, she was the only one that survived. So she's been labelled as a final girl along with these two other girls from different sort of slaughter cases. So one's called Sam and one's called Lisa, and it's about her story basically. And at the beginning of the book she's told that one of the final girls is dead and has committed suicide, and then the story goes from there. I was really excited to pick this up. Like I said, it was one of my most anticipated reads. My eye kept being drawn to it every time I looked at my shelves, and I thought I must pick that up, must pick that up. And I quite enjoyed it. I gave this 3.5 stars in the end. I thought it was a good thriller. I liked the storyline, but I just saw some of the twists coming and I didn't think it was as good as what other people were sort of saying about it. I was reading some of the reviews on Goodreads after I'd finished it, and they were sort of saying that they were blown away by it, and they, you know, were kind of kept guessing what was going on, or couldn't guess, sorry, what was going on and things like that. And I just, you know, I found it a little bit predictable, to be honest. Yeah, so it was kind of disappointing. Her second book I've got written down somewhere as an upcoming release. I think it's coming out in the next 3 months or so, so I will definitely pick that up and give her another go. This is a pseudonym, I think, for a well-established writer who they've not named. So yeah, it's kind of it'll kind of be interesting to see who that actually is. I'm assuming this is a woman. I don't actually know whether it's a woman or not, so whoops. But yeah, 3.5 stars. And then the last book that I read in February was The Roanoke Girls, and this is by Amy Engel, and this again ticked off a couple of challenges. It was a thriller that I'd bought quite recently, and also that I was revisiting. So I did read the first 20 or so pages of this in September of last year, and then ended up putting it down because I was busy with other things. But I'm so glad I picked it back up again. I really enjoyed this. This tells the story of Lane, and she is a Roanoke girl, so she's part of the Roanoke family. And at the beginning of the book, she's called back to the house in Kansas, where they all used to live when they were children. And the book is told in two timelines. You've got now, when she's back at the house and she's trying to work out why her cousin, has gone missing. Yeah, Allegra has gone missing. I'm terrible with names. And then you've got the other timeline, which is the chapters are labelled then, and it's got delving back into her as a child and when she first came to the house and what her life was like then. And it kind of switches back and forth, and I'm not going to say too much more than that, basically, because you don't need to know anything else. I really, really enjoyed this. I thought this was brilliant. I was totally captivated by the story, really intrigued to find out what was going on, really liked Lane as a character, and was kind of really invested in where she was going in her life and how her life would turn out and that sort of thing. And yeah, really, really liked it. This has got a lot of dark themes in it, so I would go into it knowing that you're going to come across some things that are quite dark and that are not particularly pleasant to read about. So yeah, know that going into it, but this is a great thriller and I would definitely recommend picking this up, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. So there you go guys, they were all the books that I read in February. I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments below. What were some good books that you picked up in February, and have you read any of these books that I talked about today, and what did you think of them? Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.